Ready when you are.
Is this from the top or?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Arnold Miners. I'm the recipe guy. I wrote a book called Black Humor, a recipe for a healthy planet. I'm finishing a book called A Recipe for Change. It's called The Pinball Model, a recipe for change. And today I'm going to talk about recipes for leadership. Let me start by talking about my favorite person in the world, Jaiye. Jaiye is my niece's daughter. She's 5. She lives in Bermuda. I live in Toronto. I live and write and consult from Toronto. And so I decided that I'm going to Bermuda 3 or 4 times a year just to hang out with Jaiye. About 2 or 3 years ago, we were watching her try and put 3-dimensional wooden objects into a template, kind of like 3-dimensional circles and squares into a jigsaw plate. And she finally got it. I think she was 2. And she was really excited. And so were we. We were elated because she got it. And I recognized that Jaiye was working. Why was she working? Because definitionally, work is what one person does, one or more people do, together to accomplish a goal. It's very simple. When little children do it, they often call it play. We often call it play. But it is work, and she accomplished a goal. What we want to do is to talk about leadership in workplaces. What are workplaces? Workplaces, that's really easy. Workplaces are places where people get work done. We're going to focus, however, as much as I love Jaiye, on workplaces where adults work. And so we're going to focus on leadership in actually Canadian workplaces and workspaces. And it will become clear why I'm going to talk about Canada, because leadership is different in different parts of the world. People who are leaders look different, talk different, have different characteristics in different parts of the world. To some extent, that's important for Canada because, why? Canada is described as one of the most multicultural cities in the world, and in order to be effective leaders, we must pay attention to various kinds of leadership styles, especially because Canadians will be moving to different parts of the world in order to be managers and leaders. Let me make a distinction between management and leaders so that we understand that distinction, so that we understand leadership in the context of what we're talking about. Management is about keeping things stable. Management is about keeping things going. Management is, as Rear Admiral Hopper, the first woman admiral in the United States, says, management is about working at making things happen. She contrasted that with leadership when she said leadership is about people. So, in a world as 100 years ago, which was pretty stable, people who were managers and leaders were very often the same people. Why? Because what happened yesterday was much like what was going to happen tomorrow, and so it was a case of keeping things going. Keeping things going as well as possible. So management is about doing things right. Leadership, on the other hand, is about figuring out what the right things are and figuring out how to influence people to get those things done. Sometimes people talk about it as having a vision and influencing people to join with you to achieve that vision. In today's world, unlike a century ago, or even to some extent 50 years ago, today's world is what Peter Vail, an international consultant, calls permanent white water. When it's permanent white water, crises are there all the time. And if we think of a crisis as also a time of opportunity, there are opportunities available all the time. Opportunities to exploit, to make the world different, to make your organization different, to make your society different, to make your community different, to make your neighborhood different. To the extent that all of those spaces where people work, it's talking about leadership, and that's where people will be working, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in organizations, in society, in the provincial government, in the federal government. And leadership is important in all those places because it is permanent white water. Because leaders have to figure out what's happening, often to predict the crisis and to figure out what they need to do in order to make their organization, their part of the world, different, and to behave in ways that invite followers to be on side and to achieve the new vision. One of the things that this means is that there is a definition of leadership. And let me talk about what that definition is. Leadership happens. Leadership's a process. And how do you know it happens? It happens when one or more people influence one or more other people to transform his or her or their reality. What does that mean? Warren Bennis, a world-renowned consultant, describes leadership as the process where people, in fact, transform reality. They make it new. We've heard the stories in war of the sergeant saying, "We must take that hill," and has 10 people around him or her. It used to be only men. 10 people around him or her to take that hill. And that hill is owned, presumably in the war, by somebody else, and they want to take it over. And it's really interesting that people will follow a leader, often to their death, to achieve that particular goal in transforming their reality from the relative safety of sitting 500 meters away to a new place where people are shooting at them and wanting to kill them. So that's what leadership is: influencing one or more people, influencing one or more others to change his or her or their reality. Now that's interesting if you think about that definition, and I'd like to pull it apart a little bit. It says one or more people are leaders. In research, in public discussion, in training and development courses, programs, such as the one we want to introduce here, and want to invite you to participate in. They talk about leaders as being one person. We've heard the stories that suggest a leader is one person. One expression that comes to mind is the buck stops here. And big desk, leader standing in front of the desk, and he is accountable. She is accountable. Another one, it comes from an old cartoon where we see extraterrestrials come to the first human they see, and they say, "Take me to your leader. Take me to your leader." Not take me to your leaders, take me to your leader. And the assumption there is that not only is a leader one person on earth, but it's one person even on Mars or wherever these extraterrestrials come from. And that's an interesting assumption. And where does that assumption come from? It's embedded in a set of values about leader and leaders that we have become so deeply embedded, so profoundly implicit, that we don't look at them. They come from the Judeo-Christian notion of there is no other God but me. There is a line in the Old Testament from Deuteronomy. I used to speak